So I played Far Cry 6 early, and it's really good. Maybe Far Cry 3 good? Now, I know how that sounds. I know it's ridiculous. But after 4 hours of gameplay, Far Cry 6 has that potential. It really was that fun to me. And yeah, I can't wait to play more. Before we get into this, thank you to Ubisoft for letting me play the game early. The first thing I think of when I look at a new Far Cry game is, will this live up to Far Cry 3? The last two games were fun, but they didn't have that magic sauce, that secret Krabby Patty recipe that Far Cry 3 did and still does. For me, just having the game set on a tropical island is enough to make me wonder, is this that game? I definitely will not make that call just after playing this demo, but damn it, I really want to, because from what I played, it has the pieces to pull that off. Anyways, I'm gonna give you guys a play-by-play of pretty much everything I got to see in the demo. What I loved, what I didn't love, and so on and so forth. So strap in, because in my 4 hours, I snuck into the heart of Esperanza. I launched rockets out of my backpack. I met crazy characters and shot ridiculous guns. And I stealth killed every stinking Yaren I could find. Just a heads up, this video will have some light spoilers throughout, because I'm gonna show you pretty much everything I did in my gameplay, but I tried my best to scrub out the details. I played the intro mission of the game from the very start, but I'm not allowed to show it to you guys. It's entirely story, but since I can't talk about it at all, here's kind of a no spoilers thought so far on the story. You play as Dani Rojas, a military dropout. She joins the guerrilla faction Libertad to put down Gus Fring's chicken empire for good. But actually, the main villain, Anton Castillo, he's great. Maybe not Vas Montenegro great, we're not ready to call that, but there's potential. I chose the female Dani, and really, she's the first thing that won me over. The voice acting, the motion capture, it's just solid. I was so focused on this because I missed having a solid main character in Far Cry 5. When you see your character talk in and out of cutscenes, the difference is night and day. She feels like a real part of this story instead of this killer robot dropped onto an island programmed to do one thing. I didn't keep a ton of cutscenes in this video because, again, spoilers, but just to tell you guys what I feel, I already care about Dani. I want to see where her story goes next, and that's a win in my book. Now to the parts I can talk about. After the spoilers section, you wind up stranded on a beach with nothing but a machete, an empty pistol, and a phone with a map. This is where I realized just how pretty this game is. I mean, the lighting, the vegetation, it made me want to wander off the main path as quickly as possible. But I stayed on and quickly found the stealth tutorial, and it's just like you would expect. It feels satisfying to slice these dudes in the jugular with these brutal animations. Then I found my first piece of gear and also realized this game doesn't have skill points or even a skill tree like we're used to. They replaced it with gear, where each piece gives you a unique perk, like extra sidearm ammo. You've got 5 slots to mix and match, and later on is when I really got to play around with some interesting combos. Be prepared to look a little goofy. I mean, the outfits are kind of ridiculous, but it feels like a good system to me. I like that I'm not just collecting every single skill and becoming a god. I have to pick and choose and find things that work for specific situations. I usually worry when a game wants me to go out and collect a bunch of things because that process sometimes gets boring, but hey, as long as I'm having fun doing it, it works with me. Soon after, this happened.
Clara must be close. Oh, fuck.
This is such a small thing, but this is the kind of stuff that I love from the Far Cry experience. I want to know that this world is dangerous, and the fact that it showed me in the opening moments, basically, made a great impression. Soon after, I met the leader of Libertad, Clara Garcia. She's got this no-nonsense, tough love attitude that really sets the tone for the guerrilla movement. You get a rundown of the situation on Yara using this map, and I kind of love when games do this hands-on approach thing, where they show you exactly what you should care about. On the map, I got to see why they're in their current situation, and also some practical things like highlighting guerrilla paths, which, by the way, are one of the coolest parts about Yara. Clara sends you on your first mission, and at first I was like, this is kind of weird. Am I playing Civilization 6 or something? But then I noticed how much dialogue and context I was getting here, and I was like, yeah, this is pretty cool. Every mission I did in the demo works like this. So It feels like Far Cry 6 is trying its best to make me care about what I'm doing and why. I got my first taste of combat when I met Juan, one of the main contacts in Libertad. And this guy is full of one-liners that actually made me laugh. Like, I was actually laughing at these.
I got more fucking X's than your porn search history.
He has this drunk Mr. Miyagi charm about him that just worked. It didn't take long before I was popping heads with the FAL, and I realized quickly that Far Cry 6's guns feel tight and crisp. There was a little bit of input lag because of how we were playing the game, but I adjusted, and before long, yeah, I was feeling like Rambo cutting down enemies left and right. This is also where I got my first amigo, Guapo. If you didn't know, Far Cry 6 doesn't have human companions this time, they're only animals, and honestly, this isn't a problem for me, so I wasn't really missing them. You can send this guy in and basically forget about him. He's a melee companion and he's really strong. Next, I learned all about the resolver philosophy. This is the game's way of explaining how the hell something like a motorbike Gatling gun works, but also lets you do a ton of customization at the workbench. You can change things like ammo types to make your guns penetrate armor better, or add a sight or a suppressor, you know, some of the more typical things. For me, this not only works well, I love the narrative connection. I can believe that people in Yara repurpose stuff like this, but everything, and I mean everything, requires materials. So just get used to looting in Far Cry 6 because you're gonna have to do a lot of it. After the next cutscene is where the game really cut me loose for the first time. I hopped on a horse and rode until I hit one of the game's checkpoints. These are basically roadblocks where Anton's men will stop you unless you avoid them completely, but if you clear these places, you'll find new weapons, unlock vehicles, and just make the area safer to travel through. This is where I tried stealth for the first time, and man, it feels good. Detection works, and I was able to machete kill one guy before taking out the rest with silenced headshots. I hopped back on my horse and followed the guerrilla path to, you guessed it, a radio tower. I was just ready to start climbing this bad boy. The game didn't even tell me to. That's just what you do in Far Cry games, right? But it turns out these aren't objectives like they used to be. This was just a landmarker for my mission. I think there was probably a stash up there, so if you wanted to climb it, you could have. Either way, a storm rolled in when I found this, and this is the second moment where I was like, damn, this is a compelling open world. I stopped for like a minute or two just to appreciate the weather. After I put my eyeballs back into my head, I met Riza, who gave me a parachute for Juan's mission. I had to infiltrate an old Spanish fort in order to find some uranium for Juan. But first, I learned how to bribe a double agent. If you holster your gun, you can actually walk up to these bad guys and then pay them to give you weapon locations and to move out of the area. It's a nice little touch that felt reasonable to me in this world. I pulled out my phone to do some scouting, and I found the officer in charge, who actually has a name, by the way. That's something I didn't expect. I added some armor-piercing rounds to my rifle and then decided to go in from the northern side on the docks. My plan was to do this stealthily, so I ended up sniping this guy, and then I spotted this side route to maybe get into the fort a different way, but I ended up missing my jumps and falling into the water. This led me to a cave underneath where I snuck up from below and assassinated my way to the top. But eventually my stealthy plans fell apart because I forgot to tell Guapo to stay, and this guy will follow you, and it's not like he's invisible like some other games with a companion. I was able to take out the rest pretty quickly, but this fort was full, and I mean full of details, like notes and different caches and stuff I could have read. I could have spent another like 30 minutes here, but you always run out of time in these previews, so I ended up grabbing their uranium and heading back. This is where Far Cry 6 introduces one of its more ridiculous features, Supremo backpacks. This one is the Exterminador, which locks onto enemies and shoots rockets out of the backpack. Yep, it does this. In the workshop, you can attach a bunch of gadgets to these things, which really confused me at first. For a second, I thought my backpack was gonna shoot throwing knives or baseballs or something, but it turns out this is just the way that you equip consumables like Molotovs and grenades. So basically, you kit out your backpack to suit a certain playstyle, and you can synergize it with the backpack or not. It's up to you. There's about 20 of these, so I'm sure there's gonna be some crazy combinations. This is where Ubi stopped me in my demo and skipped ahead a a few hours. This took me off the starter island and unlocked the, quite frankly, unholy number of options in this video game. I sat there for like 3 minutes watching everything unlock, and it continued to unlock through my next activity. I had 4 different backpacks, a dozen or so weapons, 30 pieces of gear, just absolute insanity. So I spent a ton of time playing around with this stuff. I went through the workbench and kitted out my MP40 as kind of the all-purpose gun in my loadout. Then I grabbed a Spas 12 to shred enemies up close. I also tried La Clavadora, which is this insane harpoon launcher. With all of this, I attacked a heavily guarded radio tower, and basically all hell broke loose. I was confused here because of the stuff unlocking on my screen, but also we jumped ahead so far that I didn't quite understand all the mechanics, but I ended up fighting a helicopter, I took down reinforcements, and I was having a blast. When I took out the helicopter, I ended up capturing the station for Libertad. What was also cool about this base is once I approached it, I got a call from Clara.
Hey, Clara. I'm in Aleste and looking at a pretty fucking tall radio tower.
You're kind of always getting context about the activities that you're doing in the world, at least from what I played. I decided to go back to the main story path after this, but I was sort of confused here because I got all of the briefing for that during my base assault. And it made me wish that Danny said like, yo, I'm busy. Let me call you back after I'm done mowing down all these bad guys. Either way, I made my way to meet El Tigre of the Legends of 67, which is one of the factions Danny needs to recruit for Libertad. But before I got there, I ran out of ammo. Then I started shooting bad guys on the road. And then before I knew it, the classic Far Cry thing happened where I ended up fighting wave after wave of enemies whose trucks kept appearing on the road. This was absolute chaos and totally my fault. But again, I think I blamed the jump to the main island for this. I just wasn't prepared, and yeah, I ended up kind of frustrated here. Anyways, I got to use the recurve bow, which felt so good, and there'll be some gameplay of that later too. I found this waterfall using a picture on my phone, and then I started this platforming section using my grappling hook. Now, this is a mechanic I learned in the first few hours of the game, but because I only used it once and then got jumped forward, I forgot about it. So again, I got a little frustrated here. I didn't know that I should be grappling. And it's not really because of the game, but because of the way the demo was structured. Eventually, I got the hang of it and started enjoying the platforming and the story dialogue with El Tigre. I was especially enjoying the view with this sunrise. I mean, are you kidding? This game is just flat out gorgeous. I made it to my destination, and this is where Far Cry 6 showed me the third-person sections that we've seen in trailers, where you get to see Danny and really kind of explore around with her. And I loved this part. I spent so much time wandering this camp. I found this band playing and donated some pesos. I played dominoes with these people and lost, but had a good time. I listened just to the conversations people were casually having. If Ubi made this to sort of lend a sense of realism to the world, it worked. It just felt real, and it helped me connect with the world and with Danny. Once I was satisfied exploring, I made my way back to El Tigre, where I met 2 more characters, Lucky Mama and Lorenzo Canseco. These felt like interesting characters, but if I'm being honest, by this point in the demo, I was sort of overwhelmed by new things to the point where it was harder to make mental notes of all of these new people. Again, totally a demo thing and not a game thing. After this, I did a little more exploring and ended up talking to Lucky Mama, so she wasn't just a static character. I could actually walk up and interact with her, which feels cool. I found the Bandito operations, where you can send leaders and recruits on missions for rewards like this pistol here. This felt like a system with a lot of depth, you know, a lot of bells and whistles. I just didn't have the time to fully explore it, but yeah, this seemed promising. Next, I found this guerrilla camp construction system. So it turns out at probably a lot of the camps, you can spend resources to build out special facilities that offer specific bonuses, like making bases easier to scout or getting hunting maps. Later on in the demo, I ended up coming back and building a hideout network. So this let me buy fast travel locations, which felt super useful. You can only build 2 of these at each camp. So yeah, it'll be interesting to make some this or that decisions to see what's best for my character. For my next mission, I needed to find some supplies in order to recruit more people to Libertad. So I decided to do the sensible thing and take a helicopter. This is where the game taught me about restricted airspaces. Anton rules Yara, so he's got anti-air guns around the entire island that prevent you from just flying all over the place from the very start. And I really like this idea because, one, it makes sense for the world and the story, but 2, it always felt cheap to just take an airplane in the very starting hours of a Far Cry game. You know, it's kind of a cop-out. Now, I'm sure you can fly around these zones, but yeah, I think it's smart to force players to check the map and sort of plot a safe path before you're able to take down the AA guns. So I took my copter up, and again, I was just stunned by this world. It reminded me again that Far Cry in a tropical setting, there's just something special about that. On to the mission. I ran into another new character at the objective who's part of another faction that you have to recruit. Before we could hash things out, we got ambushed, and this is where I tried out my Supremo backpack for the first time, and yeah, this thing is insane. I also used the Tostador flamethrower, which had a really short range, but it just roasted enemies alive. I felt a lot more comfortable in this fight, even though I thought these were baseball grenades instead of just baseballs. So now I had to airlift the supplies out of here, but again, there are AA guns, so I had to find and take out the cannon before I could do that. So I took a horse down the guerrilla path up to a high point where I parachuted down and then wingsuited towards the base and did some recon. I tried to do this one stealthily, but the whole place ended up getting distracted. So I blew that baby up and got out of there with the supplies to finish the mission. This is another instance of the world sort of feeling dynamic, right? Anything can happen. So the fact that these guards got distracted away from my objective and allowed me to just do it unhindered, yeah, that was kind of cool. Next up, I wanted to try out a Yaren story, which is one of the game's side missions. So I flew over to meet Reynaldo and his crazy fighting rooster named Chicharron. This is one of the crazier amigos that you can unlock in the game. Reynaldo needs my help because Chicharron got angry and ran away to fight Anton's dogs. I got this mission from Reynaldo, but I was just blown away by the expressiveness of this character. I mean, look at this guy. I learned that he lost his arm because of a fight with Chicharron, and while that is kind of silly, it was another detail that just convinced me that this game is going to deliver a lot of interesting characters like this, and I really hope it does. I climbed this tower to do some recon, but it didn't end up mattering because, yeah, this is a blow shit up mission. I took care of the guards before turning to the dogs, and I ended up bringing out my flamethrower for this, which makes me feel bad, you know, because they're dogs, but I guess it felt better knowing these were experimental dogs. After that, Reynaldo asked me to tag the water tower for Chicharron. Again, ridiculous, but in a self-aware sort of way that felt charming. Boom, then I was hit with the sunrise. This world, guys, is just breathtaking. By this point, I kind of expected that this was the only mission for Chicharron to recruit him, but turns out that was just round 1 of 2. The next mission was sort of an escort mission, so I didn't love it, and I also had that expectation that I'd already have him, but I did try out some new gameplay stuff. The El Muro, for example, is this resolver shotgun. It's actually a revolver where Danny pulls up a shield to block damage while you can blast guys at short range. It seems like this could be very deadly if you have the right kit. After Chicharron, I went back to the camp and I planned to continue the main mission, but I ended up zooming out on the map for the first time, and holy shit, this game world is massive. I mean, it's absolutely huge. Each area looks full of stuff, and it's marked by photos of either your allies or your enemies. And of course, I noticed that areas have certain ranks, which means there's absolutely some degree of level scaling. It turns out because I bought those hideout maps earlier, I realized I can actually fast travel all the way into Esperanza, the main city where Anton Castillo is holed up. So I just said, screw it, let's go for it. Let's see what happens. I ended up kind of doing nothing here, but I was happy I did it because I got to navigate around the city, which is just a very different environment. First off, it's really big. This is not, you know, your typical city. It's massive. You can't even fly over this place at all without getting shot down. So it forces you to be stealthy, and I like that. From that fast travel point, I found a guerrilla path pretty close by that tunneled deep into the heart of Esperanza, and I'm pretty sure I found Anton's building. The minimap told me that I was trespassing, so I did some walking around. I was really kind of nervous. I ended up stealing a car before I realized this area is completely blocked off. Like, I couldn't even get out of here. That's when it hit me. I should probably stop wasting time. I shouldn't be here right now, but it was really cool to know that I could go off script and explore like this. This world is completely open. When I gave up exploring, I fast traveled back to play the final mission during my time with the game. This time I took a plane, which was awesome, but I forgot about the AA guns and almost got myself shot out of the sky. Luckily, I pulled out of the zone just in time. Once I flew over this beautiful city, I jumped out of my plane like, I don't know, John McClane or something, and again, just stunned by this world. It's so fun to just know that you can fly a plane over something and jump out of it. Once I made it to the location, I got some more photos to kind of locate the secret hideout, and I gave the secret passphrase in order to enter this faction's hideout. It's here I met Yelena, another new character that, yeah, she seemed compelling. I just wasn't ready to meet so many new people. She gave me my mission, and I ended up meeting with this guy who escorted me to a helicopter via horse. And the reason I'm pointing out this guy is because he doesn't even have a name, but he had a lot of interesting things to say with Danny about the conflict in Yara. There was just this back and forth, and again, it reminded me just about how many details seem to be in this video game. You probably never talk to Guerilla again, but our conversation was so memorable to me, and that's wild. On the helicopter, I met another interesting character who told me all about the faction that these guys are in. This game just has good dialogue. If you pay attention to it, you get a lot out of it. I got to fly over this region and sort of soak in the environment before getting to this boat for my rescue mission. First off, awesome set piece. Rescue mission on a boat, absolutely sign me up. But here was another opportunity I took for stealth. And finally, I realized by this point that you can desummon your amigo, which again, I highly recommend for stealth unless you're using like chorizo. I pulled out my bow and machete, and man, I just went to work. Bow headshots, machete, stealth finishers. Yeah, this stealth feels great. Eventually, of course, I blew my cover, but I managed to save the hostages in time. It devolved into an entire assault. But then we got ambushed, and I had to defend the boat from attacking planes overhead. There were a bunch of light machine guns attached to the boat, so I could have used those, but I prepared with an RPD strapped with explosive rounds. So these guys had no chance. I was just blowing them out of the air. At one point, I realized I could actually hop in the cannons on this boat, but of course, I gave up on these because it was really hard to shoot planes like this. Eventually, our backup arrived in the form of boats, strapped, of course, with more mounted machine guns. This boat sequence felt like another fun set piece to cap off this crazy set piece of a mission. Once everyone was safe, we made it to shore, and bam, that was my time. That was the end of my 4 hours with Far Cry 6.
So I'll leave you guys with my big takeaway, the one overall thing I was feeling after finishing this demo.
I wanted more. In a lot of these previews, you get like 4 to 5 hours, and I'll be honest, I'm basically done after 3. I'm checked out mentally, and yeah, I've seen enough of the game. I kind of get the gist. I'm good. But this one, I did not want to stop playing. And that right there is a surefire sign that even though I ran into some speed bumps with like the open world sandbox and how the demo was structured, I really loved this experience. It just feels like a laser-focused Far Cry game that convinced me by focusing on story and setting, but while also not compromising on the core of the Far Cry experience, which is pure chaos. This just feels like a game that you're gonna get as much as you want out of it as you're willing to put in. If you're willing to experiment with all the guns, all the explosives, and kind of really explore every nook and cranny, you're gonna get a lot out of it. While my experience was like really positive, I do wanna leave you guys with one little worry, one little thing. I'm worried about how big this game is. We've seen too many examples of open worlds that sort of overstay their welcome, whether that's in the story and the narrative kind of loses steam, or just becomes repetitive and dull. My hope is that Far Cry 6 doesn't wear me down over the length of its runtime. I don't know how I'll truly feel about a video game until I've beaten it. That's just how I operate. So I have that small feeling in the pit of my stomach wondering, like, if this is a 100-hour video game, will I start dreading it by hour 50? Of course, open world games, that's part of the thing, you know, you sign up for that. But I'm just crossing my fingers that this is one of those gems that just keeps me engaged the whole time. I think Far Cry 6, from what I've played so far, has every opportunity to be one of those kinds of games. Then again, I could just be wrong about how big this game really is. It could be just a normal Far Cry experience. Either way, we don't have much longer to wonder because this thing is out in just 5 weeks. All I know is, yeah, this was one of the most impressive previews I've seen of a game in recent memory. Oh, and one more thing, I should have mentioned this earlier. I ran into one bug over this long. It's really polished. All right, guys, that's it. That's my preview for Far Cry 6. I had a really good time with the game, but like fire away in the comment section below. I'm also going to be on Twitter just answering questions. I know a lot of people have questions out of these events, very specific ones, and I literally do have 4 hours of gameplay to reference from. So fire away in the comment section. Let me know what you guys want to know, and I'll do my best to respond. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more from me, go ahead, hit the subscribe button. Obviously, I'm going to be playing Far Cry 6 when it comes out, so expect some sort of review video from me when that game comes out in October. You can also hit the bell for a chance that YouTube sends you my next video. It's like the lottery. You just don't know. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you on the next one.
Come mierdas. Just like the Nazis.
Exactly. I cannot believe this is happening.
Billy,